For as long as I can remember, my mind has been messy, loud, controlling, and difficult to untangle. If you're like me, you've spent a majority of your life in a difficult relationship with your mind, where it seems to be this constant opposing force in the other direction to where you want to go. I could only see my mind as the enemy, a source of misery just getting in the way of happiness, peace, and many other things which I wanted. And I was stuck looking at it through that lens. You actually couldn't have convinced me to see it any other way. So I fought hard to win against it. I resisted every single thought I deemed dysfunctional and unnecessary, in a desperate attempt to feel some sense of control. But if there's anything I've learned, it's that the mind isn't something you win against. In fact, by resisting all of these thoughts, I unknowingly fueled their growth. And I want to acknowledge that this is a difficult place to be in if you're there right now. It feels isolating when the thing closest to you doesn't feel like it's on your team. So over time I learned the hard way. I'm not going to be able to wrestle my mind into submission as much as I really wanted to. I had a subconscious belief which said something like, if I react to my mind as my enemy, I will win. But this default belief was just not true. It turns out shifting beliefs can be hard because we are changing our foundation of how we understand ourselves and the world. Our survival mind isn't a fan of this, because this sends us out into unpredictable territory, so it's fair to expect some resistance which will try hold that old belief in place. What I had to learn, which at first I rejected, was that the way you react to your mind as it's becoming noisy will either make it louder or soften it. And it seems obvious, but I had to learn this. When you fight against it, all your brain sees is potentially more threat to your survival, more confirmation of the fact that it's unsafe. This gives it more reason to be noisier, because in your brain's eyes, creating chaos in the mind could save you from a threat. So if our minds are acting out of survival and being noisy, they have to receive the message that survival is not being threatened. This becomes about signaling safety to our brain and no longer trying to control the chaos. So what kind of relationship signals safety? It's something I used to see no value in, so I encourage you to watch your reaction as I say these words. Compassionate understanding. Now, I might have clicked off this video back in the day just hearing those words because I wouldn't have been able to see how that could possibly help me. It also didn't come naturally to me. I didn't know what it looked like in practice, and it felt self-defeating as a man, even though that's far from the case. In my eyes, compassion was the last thing my mind deserved. Why would I possibly give it that, considering how hard it was making everything? But the noisy mind responds to the attention and energy you give it, just like a real person would. Suddenly, you could see your mind as someone separate to you in pain, who you care about, instead of this dysfunctional, lifeless machine. We're taught that the brain, and by extension the mind, is an amazing computer, but that also taught us to relate to it in that way as well. This means a lack of compassionate understanding, which is exactly why my default was to fight the mind, because I saw it as a faulty computer making mistakes. The mind's noise in the present moment could be understood as old patterns, which formed during past moments when you felt overwhelmed, where certain ways of thinking and feeling were needed for you to survive that moment. But these patterns get stuck and will continue indefinitely until they receive the right signals to unwind. Knowing that these past thoughts originate from a past version of you just doing their best with what they had at the time to survive and what they knew gives us actual reason to show a level of compassionate understanding. This gives us what we needed back then, but also right now. You can start to have the perspective of, oh, I get why you're reacting that way. It makes sense now. The brain literally views compassionate understanding as a safety cue and gives it reason to shift momentum in the other direction and soften. But before we can do that, we have to first be aware that our mind has become loud and protective in this moment. Meditation is taking time out to become better at that, to notice the separation between the thoughts and yourself as the observer of the thoughts. In this way, it becomes less likely that you become the thoughts, that you lose yourself in them, and instead you just watch them do their chaotic thing from a distance. It's only when you're observing your thoughts, rather than being caught inside them, that you can start to change your relationship with them. If you're new to that, you can use short guided meditations at times when things aren't so intense in your mind to begin with. So these solutions aren't going to fix everything right away, but they're going to begin to reduce unnecessary suffering and move the needle from danger to safety, hardening to softening, chaos to peace. I had to learn over time to create space for what my mind is expressing, because at one point I wasn't even letting it say anything, and you can imagine how much that wound it up. Maybe it will take some time for things to settle, but the good news is that when you see things from this new perspective, it becomes a lot less about hurrying to feel better anyway. And you can feel like you can just flow with the mind a lot better, even when it's kicking up fuss. If it feels like you're surrendering to the other team and you've lost by doing this, realize that there were no teams to begin with, because your mind was always on your side. Hey, thank you for stopping by to watch this video. Hopefully something here resonated with you, and that's about it. We'll see you next time.